Okay, so in this video, we're actually going to start building out our form. So in the previous video, we went through a lot of thought process, strategy, laying out our wireframes, our diagrams, our list schemas in Excel. It is as boring as it could be. Very fundamental, very important strategies to think before you start to touch and start building your forms. In this one, we're actually going to start building out the form. It's a long video, probably double or triple the size of the previous one, but this is the one. Just imagine that I'm sitting with you and your team. We're building these together. You're getting a lot of tips and tricks from my experience and building these out, and some gotchas, some tweaks over time of fine-tuning the strategy, fine-tuning my process on building these forms, and now I'm giving you all of this side by side. Even when I walk through this, I make mistakes. I didn't cut them out in this video because I thought they were important, because some of you may fall into some of the same traps, and how do you backtrack and find a different approach, and then try to understand why our previous attempt did not work. Some of those are in the video. Because it's so long, it's one of those things where you want to take a chunk in, absorb it, or even apply it if you're currently working on the project, pause it, come back to it in a few days, but do your best to get through the video. It's only an hour. You can probably sit through it, but it's action-packed. It's very dense. There's a lot of tips and tricks in here. Enough of me rambling. Let's get started. Okay, so now that we have our sub-site, this is where we're going to build all of our lists. So again, if very similar to what we mentioned in the previous video, this is all of our lists that we need to build, the different column types that we have for each one of them. And notice two things to make note of. We have internal names and display names for each one of these columns. So say, for example, we start to build out our clients list. Let's just go ahead and to our subsite, go new list. And of course, I'm going to do blank here and call this clients. And I'm in the navigation. If I need to hide it, that's fine. But even from a build perspective, having this in the navigation is easy to bounce between them. Now, you will notice that in our list for the title field, again, as I mentioned in the previous video, you have to deal with that title field. Either set it as a default value, which is some of the tricks I use in other lists, right? So if you go to sales rep as an example, I note here in the comments field that, just use the title field as is, but default it to the word sales rep, and then we will use that to control this, because all the other columns that I need just didn't fit that single line text, which is the column type for title. I need a person field type for the rep, and I need a lookup because the dealership is stored in a different list. So, I really didn't have a good use for that title, and that's why I represent it here. So in this scenario, for title, I'm going to just do full name, which is going to be a concatenation of first name space last name inside that field. And we'll do all that fanciness in Power Apps. And I want to say everything else is pretty straightforward. But let me show you these two, then I'll pause the video, go ahead and build this out. There's no sense for you to sit and there's no value in you watching me build all these out in a repetitious way. So here, if under title, I want to rename this. If I have this rename option here, right, but this only changes the column name in the view, not necessarily on the list itself. So for title and only the title field, I actually have to go to list settings, click on it, and then change it to full name. And as I mentioned before, my display names are going to be user-friendly with spaces, special characters, or anything along those lines. So here now, let me go back to clients. And now for the remainder of these columns, this is my internal name, and then this is my display name. So in short, I really just have to touch that column twice. So I love this modern UI in a way to interact with creating columns. So I do this majority of the time, unless I need something that's hidden under this more option here. like a legacy column type or a column type that they don't have listed here. That's the only reason what I flop over to the classic mode. So for all intents and purposes, I'm really building this out here. So let's just do first name, and we know my internal name is F name, and that's what you have to name it first. And then you just come back in here and edit the name, and then just give it the user-friendly name, and then hit save. Now, the internal name is always going to be with the column, and you only have a single shot at that internal name. So if you forget, you have to delete the column and start that process from the beginning. Now, the only way I can see well, there's a few tricks you can do. So if I sort by the column, usually up here in the URL, as you can see, I can sniff it out that way. But a clear way to get the internal name when needed, and this is really when you get to like a pro dev or a development cycle to where we actually need to reference the internal name, like in a SPFx web part, or maybe we're building something with the PNP SDK core framework. Those are going to be internal name references. So to get the internal name, what I normally do is go to list settings, click on the column I'm interested in, and then as soon as I get to this detail screen for that particular column, right here in the URL, all the time, 100% of the time, will be the internal name for this. So let me pause the video. Let me just go ahead and crank out the rest of these columns, and then I'll come back to you. Okay, so for the most part, I have most of the columns here. There are a few of them that are missing, and there's a few that I wanted to call out. So anything that required a lookup column, I did not create, because I need to have this list created first in order to make that reference. So that's going to come with the second round. The one thing I do want to highlight is the client ID. Now, prior to a recent change, I would say recent, probably within the last 9 months or a year ago, I always wanted to use the number for the client ID because that was a natural fit. You know, usually with IDs, you want to have this number to represent it. But I stayed away from it because we could not turn off commas, right, with the thousand separator. So now what's happening, Microsoft has since then released this ability to turn the thousand separator off. So now we can actually use numbers in its purest form. Now, as far as decimals, that's going to be 0 in this scenario. And I think that's all I need to do with this as far as settings on that. So I'm paying special attention to the client ID column, turning off the thousand separator and making sure it does not support decimals, because we don't need that. We're only dealing with whole numbers. Outside of that, I want to say we're ready to rock with building out the rest of the list. So I'm going to go ahead and build these out, based on these types. And again, this is really, really straightforward. This is just, standard SharePoint columns and things along those lines. So I'm going to pause the video, build these out, and then I'm going to go ahead and wire up my lookup columns. Now, understand that when it comes to a lookup column, when you go to add new, you're not going to see that option here. That's going to be under this more ellipsis here, and then you're going to be able to do a lookup. And this lookup is going to be locked in the sense that it will only consider lists that are within the same site. And again, and for your scenario, you may not have that luxury, right? So if you look at some of these column types, there may be, say for example, dealership. That's going to be outside of your sub-site when you're talking about clients in the CRM, because there may be a master list of dealerships. In that scenario, you will not be able to use a lookup because this list will not be within the same site as your other solution. So in that scenario, what we would do, I would represent the dealership as a single line text, right? And then just use Power Automate to bring in the dealership list as a data source, and then dynamically drop in here the selected value. Or in some scenarios, I may have two columns, one for the dealership ID and the other one for the actual dealership name, with the understanding that I'm updating both columns based on the selection of the user within Power Apps. So those are usually some of the tricks we had to play if I'm referencing a list that's outside of the current site and I cannot leverage the lookup. I love the lookup because on the view perspective, it has a more integrated experience when you're looking at the dealer. Then there's a hyperlink to that actual record on the dealer list. And it's just a convenience thing more than anything else than a necessity. But yeah, you absolutely can achieve this, this lookup or this foreign key, foreign lookup list relationship just using a single line text and a drop down with the list in a dynamic way. And we'll walk through some of those scenarios as well. All right, so let me pause this video. Let me go ahead and build these out, and then I'll come back to you. Okay, so I have all of the lists listed here. I have the dealership, so I actually just went right to the Tesla public-facing website. They have all of their locations listed, and of course you have to look at the dealership location versus the charger locations. I just listed the ones in Ohio, have those listed with the managers and the date. So let's just add one, just so you can just see how smooth it is, especially when using the location column versus the different explicit columns for to build out an address. So here with the location, I can just start to type the location. So this one's going to be 1125 North Broadway Avenue in Oklahoma City. So if I just start typing 1125 North and then Broadway, now I can look. Well, I see this is just such a common, so it's Broadway Avenue, right? So now I can look here, and this is the exact location. And not only does it have the location, so let me just go ahead and put in the manager for this one. So let's just select Kevin, and then the start date. Let's just say this was built in, let's just say May of 2011 or something like that. And then the rep count, let's say there's 16 reps there, and they have 23 vehicles on hand, and then we'll just go ahead and save this all. So now that I have that location field, notice what happened with this card. This card not only gives me the location, and I can quickly copy that and jump into probably Google and anyone else that can verify this, but I also have a Bing map, which is very, very convenient. Again, when it came to the client side, because I know on the client list I wanted to create a custom Power App form, we're going to figure this out. Like, I haven't played around with this as of late to see if the location field is supported in Power Apps, but that would be the caveat, right? So again, because on these fields here, I don't plan to customize this form, because I think this form is very straightforward. There's no logic. There's no cascade drop down. There's no additional validation. There's no columns I want to hide or show. There's no layout I need full control over. So this is a candidate to use out of the box. Even with layout, like if I wanted to lay this out a little bit differently, I would probably use the configure layout and then kind of use the JSON formatting to format this and probably put in like a header or maybe short this in a more of a horizontal layout versus a single column vertical layout. I can have all that flexibility available to me without jumping into the custom Power App form scenario. So for most of these lookup or utility lists, I can get away with the out of the box, but for my clients, this is the one that we want to customize and make it a little bit more easier for the admins who's going to be managing this solution. Okay, so now that I have everything built out, let's go ahead and start building our custom form that we're going to use for the admins of the solution. And in order to do that, the easiest way I found, and there's a difference, right? So I can go to this scenario and say customize with Power Apps, and then it will generate a custom form. Or I can go to integrate Power Apps and then customize the form. Now there are two paths, and in the end, you ultimately land in the same destination, which is Power Apps Studio. The biggest difference, though, and this is one thing to note, if I am troubleshooting the data that's provided by this particular list item, I will want to go this route because this is going to launch Power Apps Studio and it's going to preload this. It's going to bring this information with this particular item. Whereas if I launch it from this route, this would just be a generic form. And I can't remember if the form values will be empty or if it would just grab the first item in the list. So that's a distinction to make. It's a subtle one, but if you're troubleshooting or you're trying to play with a formula and there's a certain value that you need that use case in, and you have a list item with that, then you want to go launch this from the list item. So here for our scenario, because we're creating this brand new, we're just going to go ahead and launch this. So as that's loading, let me flash back to our form, and this is what we want to get to. So let's talk about branding a little bit. So when I build these out, my branding is very, very light. I leverage the out of the box theme, usually the gray theme. We're going to go and set this all up, and this just saves you a ton of time, right? Because as soon as you jump in here and start customizing the border color, customizing the font size, customizing the font color, label colors, and all this other jazz, you set yourself up for a very expensive maintenance story, right? So what I do, I go very broad stroke out of the box. I use the theme and I do a pepper in or very light pepper of the branding, right? So the branding is just going to be the logo, top right, the branded color, anywhere that I can. Usually the branded color is going to be my primary color. So if this was a blue, then my border will be blue. Of course, my logo will have some tone of blue, whatever the branded logo is. All of my highlights are important colors, primary colors that I use in different components is going to be the branded blue. And you will notice also with the cancel, right? The cancel, that's the branded Tesla color. The cancel font is going to be the branded Tesla color. And again, and that's how I pepper in the brand. So if you look at this, it feels Tesla, right? And it doesn't cost you a huge maintenance story because we went crazy and did all the borders with the Tesla red, so on and so forth. So just keep that in mind with the branding. Okay, so where we are. So here we are in Power Apps Studio. The first thing you do, you get this mobile mode. So the first thing I love to do is to change this to one of the standard layouts. So I just go to File, go to Settings, go to Display, and then change the orientation to Landscape. I get this warning that, changing that to landscape is going to distort whatever components you have on the board. That's fine. We can easily adjust those. And then from that landscape, for now, I think I'm going to leave it the height. Usually once I get this orientation in landscape and I take that default value, that 1185 by 790, most of the time what I have to do is cheat this height a little bit more just so that I get a little bit more breathing room for that. Keep in mind, when you're building a custom form, you do not want a double scroll. And a double scroll is the scenario that you get when, let me just flash over to one of these. So let me go to clients here. The double scroll is going to be where you have the scroll bar from the browser and you also have an inner scroll for your form component because there's not enough height on your screen to allow the form to stretch all the way out without having to scroll. That double scroll is the scenario you want to avoid when you're using a custom form scenario. Now, if you're doing the Canvas app, you're kind of locked in because the Canvas app, the landscape tablet mode is going to lock you in on the height because that's the optimal height for iPads and for desktops. So you're going to play within that limited space for Canvas, but it's only with the custom form for Power Apps do you want to avoid that double scroll. And this is where I'm going to play with the height. So for right now, I don't have a need to do that. I can always come and touch this later. So for now, I think I'm good to go. So let me just go back to this screen. And the other things that I do, and this is really, really important, especially when you start writing formulas, I always rename my screen and my form component. So here I'm gonna just go ahead and I just rename this with screen main, and I prefix these, and these really help you when it comes to IntelliSense, right? Because when you're writing your formulas, it's going to try to help find what you're looking for. And my variable names, I have a naming convention for that. My screen names and form names, any component that I use, I have a naming convention of that, because at any time that I do like a navigate and I want to find the form, I'm gonna just start typing the word form, and then that's going to help my IntelliSense filter down to all the forms that are available to me in my solution. So very large solutions, you want to come up with a naming convention game plan and kind of stick to it. Okay, so now that we have that, the other thing I want to do is really start to shape this form component in this way to really kind of move this in the way to where it needs to be moved. Now, one of the things that I usually have to pay for with changing the size is that my font size, and this really seems small. That's why I was zooming in, because I was like, is this a standard size or is that zoomed in? So it looks like this was zoomed in because I changed my screen size, and I don't want to play with this. I don't want to get in the situation where I'm selecting each one of these, trying to cheat these back to, because 10.5 I think is the default size, not 105 but 10.5. And I think that's right. So the best way to check and see if your font size is the standard font size is to select your form component, go into edit mode, and then select another field from here. It could be random, right? And I'm gonna select that. And if that comes in with the standard size, I think we're good to go. This does really seem small, but I think it's just because I'm zoomed out. All right, so I think I'm good to go. I got a little antsy there, but yeah, I think I'm good to go. All right, so now what we want to do is to start layering in our major areas of the screen. So again, if I flash over to my wireframe, this is the label, that's the rectangle, and that's the logo. And then I have this side guided navigation or breadcrumb navigation, and then I'm gonna have my form in the middle. So let's just go ahead and drop in those components so we know what type of spacing we're working with. So let's just go ahead and bring in the rectangle, and that's going to be this guy here. Nope, I shouldn't be prompted to unlock. I didn't have my screen selected, so let's try that again. So now I have the screen selected. Let's go ahead and stretch this out. I usually go with probably like a 3 or 4 height on the width of my rectangle, and then just arrow this down. And the rectangle is tricky, right? The rectangle, you have to be careful with this, because you notice that these hover colors, and if I click on there, each one of these, the hover color and the press color, they have the same value, but I want them to be dynamic based on my fill color, which is going to be this color code here. So every time I drop a rectangle in, or I copy an existing one because it's going to be peppered in with this formula, here's the strategy. The strategy is always, for the hover color, select that explicit value here, or hard-coded value, and go with a formula. And the formula is going to be self, which is look at the current component, look at myself dot field, and that's going to be the property of the field value. And I'm going to just copy that and then go into the press color and then paste that in. And that's just going to allow me, anytime that I change this field color, right? So if I go with this red, notice how these were dynamically updated. For the disable, I don't plan to disable my rectangles, so I'm okay with leaving that as is, or just for the sake of consistency, I can go ahead and drop in that formula for all 3. So that's one of those gotchas that you kind of run into. And you know that's a thing, right? Because usually what happens, if the hover is a different color, you mouse over it and you start to see this flicker effect, which is very irritating and annoying at times. Okay, so that's going to be my border. That feels a little too thick to me, so maybe let's do a 3, and I think I'm okay with that. The other thing I want to do is just go ahead and drop in my text label, and this is just going to be the title of my form. And I usually, notice what I'm doing. I'm taking that 0, 0 coordinate. So 0y, that's going to be the top left corner, right? And for here, I'm going to just probably punch it up to a 24. Yeah, that doesn't seem too boxy. And I'm going to just go ahead and type in my title. So this is going to be client details, which is going to be our first screen. Now, the question is that butted up too far left? That I easily adjust that by using the padding. I don't use the XY coordinate to try to move it. I do the 0, 0, do a 20 padding, which is pretty standard for me, and that's going to bump that over where it needs to be. So now for the far right, all I do now is just drop in my image component. Let's go ahead and get that on the board, scooch that over to the far left. Now this one I will cheat over only because I need to make room for the scroll, right? Again, so if I'm looking at this from the client view, I'm gonna get this scroll bar, and that's gonna take up probably about 7 pixels left to right. So I always have to allow for this bleed just so that the scroll bar is not covering up the component. And you won't notice this until you publish that form and you can really start seeing it. So just rule of thumb and from experience, I always just kind of leave a little gutter here, and I never try to do anything on the edge on the far right. The rectangle footer border I'm not concerned with. It's really like text copy or anything else that I know may get cut off through that scroll bar. So I always leave myself enough gutter or whale on the right hand side. So now let's just go ahead and bring in our logo. So I should have a folder for all my Tesla stuff. My Tesla logo is going to be there, hot and heavy, ready to rock. I can fill this in. Or fit. I think I'm closer with the fit, and just, I mean, this is really just eyeball. The big takeaway here is just leave enough room for the scroll bar. This is an extra image component that came on. We don't need that, so we delete it. And notice that I'm not going to go through and name every component on the board. I think that's just a waste of time. Any component, the rule of thumb is any component or value that you use in an expression, you want to give it a meaningful name. You should not, emphasize not, writing expressions with these default values, right? Data card value 4 means nothing in an expression, and when you're troubleshooting, that's when you kick yourself because you took some shortcuts and you tried to take the easy way out and did not spend the 15 seconds needed to rename this, and it would save you a ton of time in the future, right? Okay, so once we have that, the other, again, I'm looking at my wireframe here in a separate screen. Let's go ahead and build out this left area on the side. So to build that out, again, we talked about we want to use a reusable component because or a custom component, we are going to use multiple screens for this layout, for this solution. What I normally do, I go ahead and build at least the baseline of this on the default screen, and then I copy those and then create my custom component. So let's do that. So for this, to create that nav, you just start with a circle, and you want to keep this pretty tight. So let's just go with a 40-40 circle. That looks good. And we want to go with our branded color. And this is not, I'm just selecting the default red. This is not the branded red, but I can find that somewhere. Hold on, let me find. Okay, so I was able to pull up the brand guidelines for Tesla. It seems like for the web, this red color is going to be that E31937. So what I'm going to do now is if I select this circle, go into my fill color, go into custom, there you just paste it in there. That's going to be the custom red. Again, the same effect that I have with my rectangle. Notice that my disable, hover, and press colors are going to be the blue. I want to go ahead and pepper this in with the right color based on field. So I'm going to use my formula. So if I do this in preview, notice this is the impact that you have. See, notice how my mouse over there and is flashing that color. Dropping in this formula will help combat that. So I actually have, let me save something off here. I actually have that hex color on my clipboard, so I want to save that off. And then I'll just come in here, do my self.fill, select this and copy, go into the hex color, paste that in, press color, paste that in, and now we should be able to rock and roll. Okay, so now that I have that piece, the next thing I want to do is to continue with my circles, and then I also want to put these labels, and then we have to get that line there in the background. So the easiest way that I've known to do this is to go ahead and position your circle, copy and paste this. Again, this is going to give me the formulas that's part of my coloring scheme. And then I'm going to go ahead and put these on the board here. And I'm going to select these all. And then there is a very handy alignment. And you can distribute the spacing vertically between the first item and the last item of that selection. And that's going to even space everything out. Once that's done, I use this as my guide to kind of build everything else. So now if I go into my text label, the text label for this one I will have to eyeball. I do want to bump this up, maybe bump this up to, what's the next one? Maybe a 12, right? And then maybe do a semi-bold on this one. And then this is going to be client details. So double click, call it client details. And then I paste this, copy and paste that one. And then this one's going to be engagement. That's the name of that step. And paste it again. And this is going to be vehicles. Okay, so now that I have all of these in, let me just zoom in and then just feel like these are centered with the circle. There's an extra padding here that I want to zero out, and that's going to align this text within these the text box. And now I can use the text box to center with the circle, which would in turn make the text center with the circle. Okay, so I feel good with the alignment of my text. The next thing I want to do is to drop in a vertical, another rectangle to serve as my vertical line. And with this one, I'm just going to just draw that as a line there. So the width of that one, I probably will go with a 3 and then use the eyeball to center this. Now, I'm using the arrow keys on the keyboard, and I can't quite get it centered. It seems like it's jumbled. The arrow keys are jumping a few pixels between. So now I just use my XY coordinate to kind of fine tune it. All right, so the goal is to hide the rectangle behind the circles. So now I'm just going to go to my alignment, go ahead and drop this to the back. I'm sorry, the reorder, send it to back, and then drop a nice, I'll brush it with a nice little gray or charcoal gray. And the same as we did with the other ones, we just do a self-fill formula, and that's going to get all my other color placeholders to match my fill. Now, if I flash this over back to my wireframe, a couple things to note. Only the bold and the darker colors for the active screen. Everything else is going to have that muted gray color, and we want to replicate that effect here. Okay, so that's kind of the impact that we wanted to, the effect we kind of wanted to have. The last thing we want to do is to have a pinstripe, a nice pinstripe rectangle right here to separate the navigation from the form. So let's just go ahead and drop that in. Okay, so now that I have this in, I probably want to touch this a little bit and probably just a lighter gray, just so that it's more of a pinstripe than it is a thick defining border or separator between the two. Okay, so now that I have this piece down, this is one of the pieces this is one of the steps I should have done much earlier in the process, and that is to set my theme. Now, what I'm going to do with the form component selected, you will see this theme drop down here. I always go under the office and then select the office gray. All right, so now that I have my theme there, I can reposition my form on the field. And here's the other trick that I do. When dealing with the form component, notice that in our wireframe, some rows will have a 2-column layout, some rows will span across the 2 columns. So if I have any scenario where I need to have a 2-column layout, I must set my grid or my form control to display at least 2 columns. So I'm going to do that, selecting that there. The other thing I need to do, if I need to span this across to a single row, then I would just double the width size in order to force that to span. Now, once I have the 2-column layout, now I can go ahead and add in all my needed fields to my form component. So I just select my form component, go to edit. And again, this is what makes this really works, because this form component will be flexible enough and give us a lot of capabilities and flexibility in our layout, and not cost us a lot of time with chasing XY coordinates throughout the screen. So here I can go ahead and select my first name, last name. I need my address to, and then I need city, country, state, and zip. And I need full name, but I don't need to display full name. And here's the tip, because my full name is going to be required, a required field. So what I'm going to do is, let me just drop in the missing field. So I need city, state, country. I need them to select the country first. I also need the zip code, and I also need, I think that's it. Now, notice how I did that. I selected these in the order that I need them to display on the form, and I use this X in the search box to reset it, so that way I can find other items to filter. Once I'm done, I click add, and based on the order that I selected them in is the order that they will be added to my form. Very, very convenient. So now I'm going to do a collapse all. Here's another pro tip. Anytime that you're hiding a field, and in this scenario, we're going to hide the full name, you want that to be the bottom of your collection, because when this thing builds its grid, it really looks at the order behind the scenes of what these fields are in. And that saves you from trying to order something, and because you have a hidden field in the middle, it actually makes room for that hidden field on your form component. So what we tend to do, anything that we're hiding, we always make sure that's at the end of the list, and make sure that whatever we're displaying to the users are going to be in the same order consistently, consecutively in these ordering lists. Anything that we're hiding, even though it was originally at the top, we're going to stack all of those at the end of the list. It will save you a ton of time when you try to order reorder some of these items. So now that we have full name, what we're going to do, we're going to hide this. Actually, let's just leave it display until we pepper in the formula needed for that. And now we need to reposition all of our fields based on if they're single row, or if they're going to share the row with another component. And we have a few tricky things that we have to account for, but I think it's not going to be that bad. So let's see. So the first thing we want to do is address needs to have its own row. So we're just going to double the width, right? So this is going to be 614. And then same with address 2, just double the width, 614. City has its own row. Country is actually above. Oh, this is interesting. So I need to do a drop down for country, but I do not have a separate drop down. I do not have a separate country column. Let's look at this. This is actually pretty interesting. So what's happening, if you look at my country state, I actually have a key value pair, well, really just, the country, the state full name, and then the state abbreviation or state code. So I have that for both United States and Canada. Now, in my client list, I only reference one of those, and that's going to be the actual state drop down. And I'm using projected columns that actually brings in other columns from that country state list, right? So any one of these, I can, if it's a valid column type that allows it to be projected, any valid column type from this lookup list, I can project on here on my client list. And anytime there is a change in the state, this will automatically update to reflect that. Now, notice that in Power Apps, that those projected columns are read only. And I really need a drop-down list for them to select the country. So in order to do that, what we want to do is and I didn't anticipate this, so this would be fun to walk through. What we need to do is create a custom column, create our own drop-down within, this is going to be interesting, create our own drop-down for country, right? So first things first, let's do this. I think I have a way. I'm designing the solution in my head. That's why I'm hesitating a little bit, because I'm running through several different ways that we can solve for this. Let's do this. Let's solve for, because I love reusing data cards. And I think that's what we need to do here. So let's do this. Let's position this first off in the right position. So country needs to go above the state, because I need them to select the country first. That's going to be a filter on the state. Zip code doesn't have any logic. And then full name, eventually we're going to hide. So I'm going to have this country selected, and this is going to come in read only. So there's a couple things I do want to do here. I don't want that state : country, so I want to rename that. And let's just change the display name for that on the data card. And because we're changing the display name, we have to unlock it. So let's just call this country. The next thing we want to do is, this is going to be conditional. We only want to show the select, and this is going to do its thing based on the state, right? So we only want to show this in view mode, but for new and edit, we want to show a drop down. So the first thing we want to, so now what we want to do is go into the visible property and say only in new mode that we want to do that. Now, one of the things I always do, and I haven't done this yet, is in my SharePoint integration, and this only applies for custom forms. Custom forms actually, in some scenarios, more complex than Canvas app forms, because you have these different scenarios that you have to account for with the form interacting with the SharePoint list. What do I mean? So here I have a SharePoint list, and I have 3 scenarios that my form state would fall into. The one scenario is when I'm creating a new item. This is called the new form mode, right, or new mode. The other one is that I'm viewing an existing item. I'm just clicking on it. Notice how everything is in the read-only state. And then when I click edit, this is edit mode. So I really have these 3 modes that I need to account for. Now this is what gets a lot of people tripped up. The SharePoint integration is going to account for those 3 scenarios, right? So there's my new, there's my view, there's my edit. It also has some other things that you can do, like when you click the save button and when you click the cancel button. That's going to be these guys here. So if I'm editing, if I'm click on save, you can do some on save action. And if I click on edit, it can interpret that event or get fired on that event. So you can do it on cancel action. That's what the other ones are for. Now, if I click into new, basically what it does, it looks at my main form and it makes that into new mode, meaning that it primes it that says, okay, you're going to collect some information and you're going to create a record. Whereas if I go into edit, notice what it's doing to my form main. It calls this special method and throw that into edit mode, meaning that it's going to prime it. It says, okay, you exist already. We're going to make some changes. So when you do a submit form, I'm just going to update this record. And that's going to save you a ton of time compared to the patch statement that a lot of other people are using, right? I'm telling you, the form component saves you a ton of time. You just have to understand its nuances and some of the trickery behind the scene. And the same is for view. So it's going to mark this form into view only mode, which means that most of the things are going to be read only. Just understand what it's doing. So with all of that said, what I love to do is to set a global variable, and I do a set. And here's another thing. Always use set when you're setting your variable. Don't do update context. It locks you in. Update context is supposed to be a quote unquote local variable, but when you're doing a multi-screen scenario or when you're setting a variable at the SharePoint integration, update context does not apply because those do not bleed across the different screens or components outside of that screen. And SharePoint integration is going to be key. So to avoid, I'm telling you, because you're going to be chasing your tail on trying to debug these things, because some cases you use update context, in some cases you use, I always use global variables, right? I haven't seen a strong enough use case to say, dang, I wish I didn't use a global variable in that name. And if you're not using global variables because you want to use the same variable name in different scenarios, that's a recipe for disaster, right? If your components are global, right? And you need unique component names throughout your entire solution, which spans across forms, across screens, everything within that solution. Your variable should follow the same format, right? And that variable should be responsible for those values, understanding that it can be set in many different scenarios. So these are just some techniques and practices that I see in a lot of training videos that could potentially have a very negative impact, especially when you're troubleshooting, because some of the decisions that we make now makes the maintenance and troubleshooting that much more better or worse, right? So here, what I do, I just do a form mode, and I know I'm in the new mode event executed. So my form mode is going to be form mode. I'm gonna use this enum here and create this to new, right? And that's going to go ahead and set that up. Now notice I do the trailing semicolon. That's not necessary. That's a preference. I just like it because just from other dev languages, it just feels right. Okay, so here I'm gonna do on new. Again, same deal. View, same deal, but I'm gonna just do the view enum value. And then this one on edit, same deal, and then just do edit, right? Now this is beautiful because now I have a variable, and any scenario where I say, oh, I want to do this when the mode is view, oh, I want to do this when the mode is new, or I don't want to do this if the mode is any other mode except for new. I have this one variable that's set in real time, right, that I can leverage and make different local decisions based on those different components. And that's exactly what we're going to do here. So on this country mode, I only want this to be read-only in view mode when my form mode is view. So I'm going to tell it to only show itself if var form mode equals form mode, notice the enum, right, view. Now I could have put in a hard-coded value, and I have to be disciplined enough to remember what I call that value, but there's already an enum system available to me. I'm just leveraging that enum, that enumeration system, right? And this is more readable and so on and so forth. And I don't mix up, synonyms, right? So is it view or read only or viewing or views or whatever those different variations can be, that I can really create bugs because I'm having one variable but multiple values and variation of the same state I'm trying to test against. I'm telling you, little things like this makes a huge difference when coming to debug. And then if you practice them, small solutions, large solutions, you're going to be covered because you have a best practice that you're used to, and that's your natural way of doing things. Okay, so now that this is going to be hidden in the right scenario, now what we want to do is leverage this data card, and then inside of here drop in our dropdown, right? So here, let me just bring in a dropdown component, and this doesn't have to be a combo box. This is going to be a simple dropdown because we're just expecting one, a list of values. And in here, I need to bring in, actually probably need to bring in a bunch of data sources, but we're going to bring them in just in time, like exactly when we need them. So for here, let me search on SharePoint. Add a data source, search on SharePoint connector, SharePoint Data Connect, and then here, just select one of these. And then recent, we've been in this client site all day, so everything should be available to us. And what I want to bring in is my country states. And let's just go ahead and bring this in. Now, this is going to be a little bit tricky. I'm going to warn you now, only because I need to do a distinct value list, right? So if I'm looking at this country states list, I need a unique list of countries, right? Distinct list of countries. So easy enough, I can bring in country states, right? And that's going to be my source. And this is interesting. How come this hold on one second. It's probably hiding behind that hidden label, right? Oh, it wants me to, because I'm bringing in everything, it wants me to know, it wants me to specify what am I showing for the value. So for value, I want to show country, and that's going to be the country. I'm just not 100% on why I don't see a drop down. All right, I have no idea why I don't see my drop down handle for this drop down component. So let's just do this. Let's just go ahead and save off what we have. And that's the thing. I mean, we haven't saved in a while, and let's just go ahead and publish this to SharePoint. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back. I'm going to click refresh here. Usually, if you refresh Power Apps Studio, there's no way to get back in it. You can't really savage that session, so you're going to find yourself starting a new session anyway. So here I'm going to do my Control F5. I'm expecting to see my new form pop up here. Okay, so that's my form. Now if I go into edit mode, I see this, and again that carried over here. I have no idea why. That maybe it's the data card. Yeah, maybe it's that data card, because I reused the data card that was read only. So yeah, I use the data card that's read only, and that's not helpful at all. Okay, so I'm gonna have to scrap this a little bit. Yeah, I'm gonna have to scrap this. All right, so let's do this. Let's go back to let's cancel this. Let's go back to our Power Automate Studio, and let's I know it's still recognizing the old session. Let's use a data card that's custom, I guess. Yeah, let's just use a custom data card. All right. Yeah, that was not pretty at all. All right, so let's go ahead and drop this one. So let's just remove it, and let's add in a custom card, and let's drive that up into position. That's going to be our custom card. And then over here on the left, I want to rename that. So let's rename this. Let's just call this DC Country. And now we have this here. I'm going to have to bring in both my text label, right? And then I also need to bring in my drop down. And I'm going to really have to eyeball this to kind of get it to feel and look like one of the out of the box ones, right? So the first thing I want to do is to position this in the same way that we have these labels, and their XY coordinate is going to be 3210, and that's going to be contextual to the data card, right? So if I put this in, and I do 32 here, and then 10, that should be spot on. They're using a 10.5 and a semi-bold, so I want to mimic that. 10.5, all I need is a semi-bold. Okay, so we're spot there. And then for their input, they are using, what are we doing out of the box? 32 by 43. So let me just do this, 32 by 43. Does that feel right? 32, yeah, 32 by 43. The width is 247, the height is 32. Width is 247, height is 32. I feel this is not right. Oh, wait. Oh, my height is off. So the height here should be 28. So let's match the height. There we go. So now I'm in the game. So, and that's the thing, like the whole point of this is to be consistent and to feel out of the box when and where possible. So now that I have this there, I can, now let's try my country states drop down. And then if you put a single quote and then starts typing in countries, it will help you out. So now I have, this feels a lot better. That's going to be blank because it's bringing in a lot of columns, and I need to specify which one to display. So we're going to say country, and this is what I was expecting, right? So I'm showing the country for every entry of state or province. So now I need to filter this out to get a unique list. Now, in order to do that, you have to use this distinct, and then that's going to get a distinct. So it asks the source, and then it's going to ask which column do you want to make distinct. And in our case, it's going to be country. And this is the part, yeah. And then if I preview this, everything I have is going to be in that result list. So now I have to do a dot results to kind of bring that forward. And now if I look at my drop down, there is my distinct list. And then when it comes to my state, what I need to do, I love this choice option, but I don't love this choice option. So for here, I'm going to scrap this because I don't think, yeah, I'm going to scrap this. I have to unlock it first. And then I'm going to do a filter to where, yeah, this is just a lookup with the ID. So I want to do a filter, actually get rid of this entirely. Do a filter on my country list based on where the country equals the selected value from this guy. Now, this is where I do my renaming, because anytime I'm going to use this in a component or in a formula, I need to rename it. So let's just, so each one of these I have like a prefix. So I have a prefix for dropdown, it's going to be DD, and then the name of the field that dropdown represent. In this case, it's going to be country. And now if I go here, it's going to be DD country, right, dot selected text, right? And I think there's another property there, the value. And then that's going to be here. And this is going to be filtered based on the selected text. And now what I can do one of two things. I can specify only bring back the territory or the state, and then that's going to narrow, take out all the other columns, because I really need to only consider that one column. And now if I select this, let me go to properties, select this drop down. I only have one record, so I should be good. So now if I select Canada, hit the drop down, those are all my properties for Canada. And you can do some other, UX things as far as clear this out. Like anytime there's a change here, you can reset this. All right, so now let's do our full name. So with the full name, this is where we want to set the default value based on first name, last name of the text that's typed in, right? So here, let's just grab first name, give this a value. So here I'm just representing the value. So let's just select, I prefix this with a V, and then just call this first name. And then the same with this one. This is going to be last name. I just put a prefix of V, just call this last name. And now when it comes to the full name, the default value is going to be, I'm trying to think here, because do we really need this, or do we just display the default value every time? And I think that's going to be the best approach, the less buggy approach. So let's just wipe this out. And for full name, the default value will always be V first name, and here's the concatenator, space, ampersand, V last name. And I think I need a dot text here to actually get the string out of the text box, right? So that's going to give that. And now what this is going to grant me, if I look at this in preview, so now if I type whatever here, it's going to automatically reflect it, and then it's going to automatically be saved to the SharePoint list, right? And because this is a required value, you want to absolutely make sure this is saved. Now let's talk about required fields. I do not set, and again, when you get to Power Automate, this is why you do not want to do this. I do not set the required fields on the SharePoint list. If you watch any of my videos, you keep hearing me say this time and time again in respect to list schemas and Power App solutions. And the number one reason for that is that we're going to process this data. We're going to collect it using Power App forms, and we probably eventually going to trigger a Power Automate. And usually in that scenario, there's a status field, right? So once a Power Automate does its thing, maybe there's an approval process, and once it's approved, we change the status. And so we have to update this record. If you make the required field on the data source versus in the Power App, because really the required means that when I'm gathering this data, I need to ensure that they populate this field from a user perspective. If I put this on the data source, then everything I do to manipulate that, I have to account for all of those required fields. So to update, for example, to update this simple status, and if I made 5 of these or 12 of these required, I would have to specify a value for all 12 in addition to that status value. But if you do not update or put the required field on the data source, you can still make it required. You just put the required on the Power App form itself, and that's what we're going to do here. So I'm going to do is just go here, unlock each one of these, and then go to required. Now let me show you another trick. The other trick is, notice that I flip-flop between setting values here in formulas or setting values here. Over in this property pane on the right. The reason why I use the property pane on the right is extremely useful is that for this very scenario, I need to touch a few of these fields and then just make this required. All I have to do is flip over to that field and these become required, and then the property that I need to change is right here available to me. As I bounce between all of these, this scroll bar is going to stay fixed in that area, and that way I can easily do, these quick touches to update the value. And notice, even if I scrolled all the way down here, like I need to change the height for all of these, I can just bounce between these various data cards and notice how it stays on this property. Whereas in contrary, if I go to this drop down here at the top, and let's say if I'm changing the XY coordinate, I don't see, right? I would have, it just costs me so many double touches to get that over there. So that's the reason why we use this property pane on the left. So here, let me just go and update all of these to be required. I have to unlock them. That's a pain, especially for the first time. And then for city, can I click on this? Nope, you have to keep scrolling up. Oh, I didn't rename this, so let's rename this to country. Okay, so now I have everything I needed to be set to required. Now I can hide this full name because I don't need the user to interact with it. We're going to capture that and concatenate, formulate a full name behind the scenes. And if I zoom out of this just a little bit, I think we're good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and save this and publish it out. The next thing I want to do is, one, we need to confirm that this whole combination with this cascading dropdown is working as expected, especially with resetting this and changing Ohio. Then we need to go ahead and pull this out to its own component, and that's where we're going to jump into custom components within Power Apps in our next video and really try to get this working and then start building out our other screens. So a lot to unpack here. Any questions, go ahead and leave it in the comment section. And until then, I'll see you in the next video.